have the feeling this economy isn't working for us. More Perfect Union did a great piece recently on how consolidation in the restaurant supply industry is hurting us. I'm an economist and I'm doing videos about how the economy works and how it doesn't work for us. In this video, we're going to be exploring how a handful of companies, sometimes just one, comes to dominate, pushing out the little guys, and why this might be bad news for us. So, what do these guys do? Restaurant distributors provide everything a restaurant needs, all the input ingredients. So think milk, eggs, meat, salt, napkins. Now you'd probably hope or expect they're sourcing most of their food locally. And in some cases, with great difficulty, restaurants may be trying to do this, although it's become really hard to do. Because over the last 50 years, that's not really how our food system works anymore. Increasingly, everything is made and distributed by a few ginormous firms that operate nationwide. The biggest, Cisco, is now, 10 years ago was just under 40% of the market, so I'm sure it's much bigger at this point. And it was created initially from a merger of 9 with the express intention of creating a Goliath. Since then, it's gone on a long acquisition spree, buying up over 150 of their competitors. So these few ginormous companies, there's only really possibly 2 national competitors, are no longer really aiming for local food sourcing. You have the peculiar situation where crops that may have been grown a few miles from you are being harvested at scale, transported, processed, and then shipped all the way back. But worse than some inefficiencies in transportation, as local supply nodes and systems have given way to a few giant national nodes, we find ourselves racing to the bottom in ethical standards. Much of our food, even stuff that used to be grown or raised in country, is being sourced from the cheapest possible supplier globally, often overseas, and in the drive to drive down costs, this sometimes involves supply chains with slave labour. Where it is sourced domestically, in the US here, Cisco works with the biggest suppliers nationally in order to buy in massive bulk and get bargain bin prices and eke out more fat as the middlemen. Bargain bin prices mean corners are being cut. In production, working with firms with the most exploitative production models. Which brings us to the living conditions of the animals we raise for meat. The same Goliathification, as I like to call it, bit of a tongue twister, is happening in food production too. So big industrial mega farms are pushing out or hoovering up small and family-run farms. So Cisco sources all its chickens from Tyson, which sources from thousands of smaller farms. And Tyson, along with a few other Goliath food suppliers, think Purdue Farms, Koch Foods, some names we might recognise, they've all been sued for pushing farmers into debt whilst keeping them bonded and forced to supply below cost. So this is how they're getting these, basement bin prices. And some of you might be saying, well, we're getting the cheap chickens, right? I'll cut that bit. So what does this remorseless push for cheap meat look like for the animals we eat? As consumers, we're still painted a fairy tale picture. Deliberately, we still imagine farms as blissful, happy places, happy, frolicking lambs on green pasture. But over the last 50 years, and in fact much longer, welfare and caging conditions have become more and more punishing for animals, ramming in more and more per square metre until they can barely move, with no access to outside space, light, or natural ground cover, and unable to engage in their normal natural behaviours. So for instance, pigs like to root around in the dirt to sort of regulate their temperature. It's just a kind of ingrained behaviour, as well as keep their area scrupulously clean. When they are caged in this way, rammed in these really unhygienic and unsanitary conditions, that's not something they can do. Because of this extreme overcrowding, think of the squalor and disease in slums in the industrial era. Animals are pumped full of massive doses of antibiotics, which is producing lower quality, stressed and colourless meat. And due to the industrial scale of use, it is speeding up the rate at which bacteria is mutating to become resistant, and thus we have the rise of superbugs. So in the UK, there are de minimis rules for the number of animals per square metre, although this is set very high. But in the US, there is actually no legal limit. It's set where it is by states. And you can understand the pressure that comes to bear when you have, giant billion-pound companies lobbying, small local governments to push for the, most extreme conditions, so that they can extract as much profit as possible. This is the effect of all this consolidation on economies across the US. Well, as local suppliers and growers disappear, or their income falls, as the middlemen squeeze, we see a hollowing out of local economies and local jobs. This is just one industry, but the same dynamic is playing out writ large. Instead of thriving local businesses supplying from local or regional farms, creating jobs and ensuring fresh produce, this would keep money and profit cycling in the community. We have a system where profit is consolidating in a few Goliath firms, middlemen really. Jobs are disappearing, and these hubs continue to hunt for ways, remorselessly, to shave off costs, leading to a race to the bottom in ethical standards and quality, with increasingly no opt-out. There is no competition. Okay, what about choice? Back to Cisco. So as well as the core ingredients, for decades, food suppliers have also been providing fully prepped items. So think deep fried stuff and pre-made desserts, jalapeno peppers, etc. Stuff you can find in the frozen food aisle in your supermarket, a lot cheaper. So as the restaurant supply market has condensed to effectively one company in many places, we are in the truly dystopian position where food across the US is starting to taste startlingly alike. The same identical cheap processed gunk, but at eat-out, take-out prices, often not even made in the US. So in More Perfect Unions we video, with just a few samples, they seem to find the same ubiquitous pre-made garbage from Cisco, from Omaha to New Jersey to Alaska. So we have all this complexity and evolution in the market, in the economy, and yet we find ourselves with less choice, low welfare, offshore produced garbage. I don't know about you, but this is kind of depressing, kind of dystopian. The US, but where the US leads, the UK is but sure to follow. Just, a short hop and a skip behind. It would be interesting if anyone is familiar with this industry in the UK or Europe or other English-speaking countries, or anyone that's listening to this really, what if it's a sort of similar situation in your country. Okay. So there's all this effort, all this sort of remorseless push to sort of consolidate and drive down prices, almost a race to the bottom in standards and quality and welfare. So I guess the question is it bringing down costs? Not so much. The sell of this system is that companies hunting for efficiency and lower input costs will translate to lower costs for us at the checkout counter. But we're finding food, well, all prices, skyrocketing. So we seem to have this paradox of what seems to be the worst of all worlds. Incredibly unethically produced, low quality stuff and less choice at inflated prices. How can this be? The problem with the system we have, where we let the big dogs hoover up the competition, is that you end up with not much of a market at all. And that's the strategy of these monster firms. Once you own 40% of the market, or 4 of you own 80%, it's not really a market anymore. It seems to work much more like an informal cartel. You don't even need to go to the trouble of writing to each other or meeting in dark and smoky rooms. Hey, let's fix prices by 10% next year. You just start edging prices up far beyond your costs, and the others get the game and meet you at the top. No one need go to the trouble of a price fixing meeting. Even worse, we now have algorithmic pricing on major platforms, literally price fixing across thousands of sellers to maximize profit for the platform. I'll do another video on this specifically if you're interested. So in a normal market, customers would simply go elsewhere, but in markets this close, there is no elsewhere. The big players have it all sewn up. There is simply not enough competition to keep the players playing straight. So in many rural areas, Cisco is the only option. There is nothing else. When you dominate this much of the market nationally, the normal rules no longer apply. You become the whale. You are the market. Okay. And now we come to the juicy bit. What do you think about markets that are set up in this way? Does this seem like a good way to set things up? An efficient way? Because the story we've been told is, if you leave everything to the market, we get the best result. Don't put in guardrails. Don't worry about big firms dominating. Forget about antitrust. Just leave it. It'll sort itself out. But it doesn't really seem to do this at all. And what's more alarming is the system is becoming worse over time. Fewer firms, closed markets, monster monopolies, and massive bumper profits for the big guys. And for the rest of us, well, I suppose we get the cost of living crisis. If you want to keep digging into this and why the news, our politicians and pundits don't seem to have very much to say about the squeeze ordinary people are experiencing, join me for the next video.